Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
Okay, so I've got a word I want to talk about today, and it's a really yucky word.
Oh no. Oh no.
Yucky. So whoever is listening, make sure you're not like putting your coffee up to your mouth, or make sure you didn't have, if your stomach's queasy already, don't listen right now. In fact, go get the Pepto now. Yeah. And then come back and just hit pause. Take your Pepto. But the word is embezzlement. And I'm bringing this up because apparently the other night there was a pediatric event in our local group, whatever, and I didn't get to go. And my associate the next day was kind of telling me about different things. He's like, "Hey, so and so mentioned they might be dealing with an embezzler in their office," and my stomach just like immediate sphincter tightening. Right? I'm like, "Oh God!" And so. He kind of asked me, like, how do we know? And by the way, the office that he's talking about are people that I consider mentors to me. Yeah. Like, so just thinking about it from my friend having to deal with this, my mentor having to deal with this, and then going, oh, crap, if that reputable practice could be dealing with this, what about silly old me? Yeah. Right? So, and so as I'm thinking it, associate says it, like, how do you know we're protected from an embezzler? Yeah. And so I haven't thought about that in a long time. And so I kind of wanted to just dialogue with you to make sure that the things that I have in place that you think are enough, or are there things that I could be missing?
I know it is a yucky topic, but it's one of those that I do feel like I think we kind of worry about at the back of our mind, or the word will periodically pop into our head, but it is something that we need to be making sure that we've got good systems for.
So I think part of that too, it's like, it's so yucky, we don't want to think about it. It's so like, I'm up to my eyeballs in so many other things. And now I've got to worry about that. And it all goes back to people. And that's the hardest part of what we do, especially now with the hiring and firing issues and everybody asking. I had another colleague text me the other day and she said, I'm hiring, interviewing for front desk, and this person wants $30 an hour. And so just, so now we're like, okay, we've got so much else on our plate. And to now have to look at it from a lens of, we're looking at our people going, are you stealing from me? There's just so much, murkiness around that it's easy just to go, well, I think I'm good. Yeah. Or could you be hyper paranoid and now you are driving your staff away? I don't know. Like, yeah. It's such a point of, you're trying to create this camaraderie, and we're a team, and we build and we work together, we're a family, but are you stealing from me? You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's just it's a weird one to kind of balance. So I guess to me, what I'm hoping out of this podcast is, I know there's a lot out there about embezzling. I think for me, what I was hoping was maybe you could point to certain offices that you like what they do. Because I know it also depends on the size of the office. That's the other thing I was thinking of. Like, there's one of your clients I know that he's got, there's 3 or 4 associates. They're a gigantic practice. Mm-hmm. Obviously, his methods are going to be different than mine, small to mid-sized practice. And then I know you've got a lot of clients that are like, it's just 1 doc and 4 people. So if we could just take away some general 2 or 3 nuggets that would make us feel better, yeah, without having to lose sleep over this. Yeah. Is that something you think you could?
Definitely. Okay. So a couple of things that I would say is, first and foremost, we've got to have this very clear knowledge among the team that somebody's always watching. And I think that's where a lot of practice owners get in trouble, because they've completely turned over the reins. I'm just the doctor. I'm here to do dentistry. And there's, at least amongst the team, there's this perception that they don't have anything to do with the business operations of the practice. And that creates this opportunity for people. So even somebody that may not have even been thinking about embezzling, but man, times are hard. I got to buy this car now, and money's tight, and I've got this opportunity right in front of me. And then that's where, creativity gets started and they figure out how to steal. So I think there's got to be this general tone that either the practice owner, the CPA, the whoever is involved, the spouse even, there's this perception that somebody is watching the numbers very closely. So
you're saying, like, it's good if somebody is watching, but even pre to that, it's the illusion, at least there's that culture vibe feeling, and it would be good to actually make that happen. But in the meantime, step one is making sure that there's a vibe of somebody's checking.
That somebody's always checking. And you can do that pretty simply. So I normally recommend for like a practice owner that's, got a small team and he's just got his sweet Sally at the front that's doing everything. So her hands are fully in the financial pot. Use that end of day report and just go ask Sally a few questions. Hey, Sally, I was looking at this adjustment right here. We wrote off this amount on Bob Jones's crown. Can you tell me why we did that? Oh, yeah, we ended up having to, write off because the, insurance paid less than we were expecting, and I didn't think you would want to charge Bob that difference. Oh, well, let's actually talk about that a little bit on what we need to do going forward. And then there's this whole financial conversation that happens. And so there's plenty of patients that doctor can review, but he might pick one or two that he sits and talks to Sally about. Well, now this tone to Sally is he looks at those reports. He asks me questions about those reports. There's some accountability in here just because you're asking questions. So I don't think, in all honesty, that it has to be much more than that, other than the doctor is very aware. Now, there are some clients that I have that they are extra involved in all of that. So they are the ones that open the checks. So nobody else in the office is allowed to open any of the mail. The doctor opens the checks and looks at everything, and then they themselves hand those checks off to the person that's going to put them in. That's a form of this. The doctor is informed. The doctor knows what's going on. And so they may, keep track with those checks. They may be the ones that take the checks to the bank or run the actual deposit. They don't let anybody else take the deposit.
So real quick to interrupt there, couldn't somebody go get the checks and be like, oh, this is a Delta, this is this, I'm not even going to give the doctor that in the mail? So does that mean the doctor's got to go check the mail too?
I have some doctors that do. They're the ones that get the mail out of the mailbox. So I think depending upon the doctor and depending upon the team, if it's a newer team and you've got a couple new people that you're like, there's not a trust factor there, maybe you ramp it up a little bit. You're like, oh no, I'm going to run by and get the mail this morning. And then you're the one opening the checks. You're like, here's the checks. I've looked at all these. You can go ahead and deposit those, or you can go ahead and chart those in the accounts. And then they come back to me. I'm the one that takes the deposit to the bank, so just bring that back to me. And oh, by the way, we'll also go over the deposit slip at the end of the day and just kind of check some balances. I like to be really involved in that, so thanks so much for taking care of that, right? So when a new person's on the team, that doctor may just ramp it up, where it basically just takes out the opportunity. Somebody is scared to make a move in any kind of direction because that doctor is so closely watching.
And I really like that. I can see where that would taper off is over time. As the doc, we get so overwhelmed with other things, and we do start going, she's got it, I think she's scared, or I think she thinks, and then that's where we can lose sight. I know that's happened to me back when the office was smaller. Now, I think if you're a general practice and you see 10, 12 patients a day, I think that's something that maybe you need to always keep and stay on top of. In our practice, pedo practice, I can't do that for 50 patients a day. I just can't. So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I do want to come back and kind of go over, because I want to go over what we're doing and you critique what I'm doing and give me thoughts, because when this was said to me the other day, it was like, well, are we protected from embezzler? My thought was, oh God, I think so, but I'm not sure.
Right.
And I need to talk to Bethany about this, and hence this podcast here. I'm like, hey, can we talk about this yuckiness?
Well, and I do think you're making a really valid point, because sometimes we're super hyper aware when somebody's new on the team. And then as we develop this relationship with this person, we kind of let our guard down. We become a little bit lax in those systems. And I think that is exactly where embezzlement happens, because I can't tell you how many times when I've read a story or heard of somebody that's been embezzled from, it was from the person they trusted the most. And that's because we relaxed so much that now we put ourselves in a position.
That makes my head hurt. That makes my stomach hurt. But that really makes my heart hurt. Like, because I could just see me being that person very easily.
Yeah.
Very easily.
Yeah. So no matter what, you may start out hyperactive with like a new employee, but you have to keep some measure of making sure that people who are financially involved in the practice know that even if it's not you, the doctor's still checking. Hey, by the way, my spouse, ran through reports. He or she had a few questions on things. He's going to email you about those. And again, they can be random questions. It doesn't matter. The point is that even your longtime people see that there's some involvement. Or my CPA, they look at the accounts, they're balancing everything out, and they had a few questions for me that I couldn't answer. So I'm going to have his secretary call you, or what. Somebody needs to know that somebody is watching at all times.
So you say that, and it makes me think of, and I always feel bad, but then I always feel good about it. Like our CPA does send monthly, like the suspense report, like things that they don't know where to allocate that money. And so I have to go in and I have to go through each item and say, like, this was a staff lunch, this was a doctor lunch, this was a, whatever, a dental material we bought, whatever. And usually I can answer and account for most of them, but sometimes there's not. And sometimes I'll just do it just 'cause.
Yeah.
Where I'll send it out to people in the office going, hey, what was this for? And it's not even a concern about embezzling. Like for me, it's even more about, are we responsible for what we're purchasing? Like, why is the Patterson amount this much? Like, what did we spend more this month that we didn't last month? And are we being responsible with our dollars? Because I know we didn't buy any new equipment. I know the patient numbers were the same. I know, like, there's no reason we should be paying $2,000 more to Patterson. What are y'all doing?
Yeah.
And so by me sending that out, people know that we are watching stuff, and we are watching every transaction,
every
that
dollar
happens.
in, every dollar out.
Right. Now, do I exactly all the time for everything? There's no way I can. But there are things that, like you said, like Amazon, for example. So my husband watches that, and he's like, what did you buy from Amazon here? And there are times where I'm like, I don't know. Like, we've caught one that it was silly now when I look at it, but it was maddening. We were trying to buy paper from Sam's, and I think the paper should be like $30. And we caught on there that somebody ordered it from Amazon. It was $100 for the same exact box of paper.
Oh my gosh.
But anyway, that was a whole nother drama story, whatever. But I think it was just somebody who was going, shoot, I'm going to get in trouble for not putting this on the Sam's list. I'll just order from Amazon. I don't think that person was being malicious by any sense. I honestly don't even think they probably looked at the price. They were just like, oh, Amazon can get the paper here and it will go unnoticed. But it didn't go unnoticed because it was like, where did this cost come from? Funny enough, the paper still came from Sam's. It was funny. Like Amazon, I don't know if they had, whatever it was, but 3 times the amount.
Yeah.
And so that was a good thing to find. But anyway, the point is that somebody's watching. So I hate to make this about me, but can we talk about mine?
Yes,
just because I want
please.
I want to make sure that I get.
Yes. And yours is big enough. You're I would say a medium-sized practice. And so there's a lot of medium-sized practices that could benefit from what you're doing.
Okay. Well, thank you, because I want to benefit myself, because I want to make sure that I get your thoughts on are my systems in place properly. So in my office, our AR person is she works remotely. And so to me, does this work is what I'm asking. Like, so we have our electronic EFTs that, they get deposited in the bank. Yeah. So I like that because nobody's touching hands on that.
Right.
Then we get paper checks in the office, but the AR person doesn't obviously get those paper checks.
Right.
And then we scan in the EOBs. The checks come to me to deposit at home. My husband every week looks at the bank statements and I guess things that honestly, I can't even remember exactly what it is, but basically he and the AR person communicate with each other. And she's like, did you get these? And he's like, what are these? And they reconcile to make sure all the bank transactions match up.
Yeah.
So my question to you is that enough? Like, are there holes in there? Like, so basically, like, nobody could steal a paper check out of the office because the AR person would be like, hey, this patient owes this balance.
Right. So it is what you have in place is the closest thing you can get to protection for a few reasons. Number one, your AR person, who is the person, primarily responsible for the finances, is never actually touching cash or check. It's just her taking the documentation and applying it to the accounts. Not to mention, that same AR person is also reconciling with your husband. So there's built-in accountability there where he's actually looking at the bank account. So he's looking at it from a completely different vantage point. So she's fully aware he's watching. She's actually never touching anything. Like, she doesn't have access to the bank account, right? So she can't get in there and manipulate anything from a bank account standpoint. So it's the most secure method of handling finances. There's one aspect that you could still be susceptible to, which is cash payments. Because those happen within the office. And technically, let's say a parent comes in and they're like, oh, it's $800 for today's visit. Okay, here's $800 cash. Technically, whoever received that payment in your office can pocket that cash. Now, there's two outcomes of that. One is they pocket the cash and they don't put the payment in, and it still looks like that patient owes. Now, that's a pretty stupid way to steal money, because that parent's going to say, no, I paid $800, and a lot of people that pay in cash want a receipt. And so most of the time that's going to come to light pretty quickly.
So then the AR person would be like, hey, mom, you owe this bill. No, I don't. I paid $800. And then that's how Sally would be exposed, that she pocketed
all of a sudden $800 went missing. Now, this is where it's like, should I say this? Because I don't want to give anybody any ideas. But we need to. So the only way to get around that situation, so your lady at the front takes $800, she doesn't apply a payment to the account. She applies an adjustment to the account. So on the deposit slip, there's no payment of $800. There's no payment in petty cash of $800 that now throws our petty cash out of balance. Your AR person is none the wiser. She's like, oh, there's no payment. I mean, the account is zero because of that adjustment. And nobody owes anything. The parent's not asking questions. The parent received a receipt showing $0. They didn't look at anything else on there. They just see $0. So the one area that I feel like every practice is oftentimes susceptible to is that adjustment category. And so that is where we got to be watching our adjustments, and not like a hawk, not every single account. You just want to have some oversight in those adjustments, whether that's you, whether that's your husband, whether that's somebody else on the team, somebody not involved in the finances of the practice or the patients, just somebody that's looking at those adjustments on, I would say, a monthly basis and figuring out if those adjustments look like they make sense. You can just spot check them. If you've got, 150 adjustments for the month, go pick 10 of them. Is there anything that looks off? One of my clients, I do this for because I just was a little bit, I wanted to be concerned because he had a very long time employee. The adjustments seemed inconsistent. I felt like I was just seeing adjustments that were high one month, low one month. We were writing something off. So one of my main tasks when I started working with this gentleman in his practice was, I want the adjustments to go away. Like, no, we're no longer writing off for this. We're charging for that. We're not writing off for this. We need to use this specific code, this adjustment code, when we're writing off for a, veteran discount. I want it to be this code, not this code, this code. And so it's just all streamlining those adjustments. And then when I'm with him every other month, I'm spot checking. Is there anything that looks off? And then I'm letting him know, will you please look at these accounts? Because I don't understand the adjustment on this. It doesn't make any sense. So having somebody on your team that maybe doesn't know the patient base or isn't familiar with the situation, that's looking at a very bird's eye view and going, something seems off here. And then you're having to dig into it. So that's the only area that I would say in your particular scenario, you've covered all the other bases. We've got finances spread out among different people. We've got you're actually depositing the money. Your husband's watching the bank account closely and communicating with your main AR person. The only thing is cash and adjustments is what we would need to tighten up a little bit.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So so this client you're talking about, did you find any, was she doing anything weird or what? I'm just being nosy.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. There's something called forensic accounting, which is where it's exactly what it is. You go through trying to find fault in microscopic detail. So when I first started, that's what I was doing. But it was so all over the place. And this doctor was an adjustment heavy doctor. Like he did a lot of just discounts and that feels like it should be cheaper. I feel bad. He's just got a bleeding heart, super sweet guy. And so he was writing off electively a lot of things. And so it's almost like there was so much inconsistency that I still don't know. And I don't even know that he would know because he was so kind of flippant with his write-offs that I don't know that he would. So I made him aware of everything and kind of left the ball in his court. And according to him, he felt like everything was probably in line. But it's almost like there was so much that there very well could have been. But we certainly turned, if there would have been any type of pocketing here and there, which there were some accounts where I was like, this has to be embezzling. I can't see it any other way. But I came in so hard on those adjustments, and there was such a culture shift on how closely that was being watched and managed. So I got to a point where I was actually copying the front office team on my questions, like, why this, why this, why this, that if there was ever in the past, there is no longer.
So what does that mean when you're looking at it going, there's no way that this has got to be embezzlement? What does that mean? Why would you?
When a patient is left with a balance of, $232 and the only thing I see is an adjustment, then it's either we literally wrote everything off, like the patient didn't pay anything towards that visit, which is weird. Why would a patient not pay anything towards those 3 fillings? That doesn't make any sense to me. So you got the insurance payment towards that visit and then just an adjustment.
So then my thought would be maybe it's the nephew of the dentist and so he's writing it off. Or
and
maybe
that's what I don't know.
Okay.
That's why you need to have somebody neutral that's like, this doesn't make sense. And then the doctor gets it and is like, oh, that's my cousin. Of course it's free. And that very well could be the case, but those are what I hone in on.
So what would be one that would make you not hone in on? Like an adjustment that would look okay?
I really hope nobody's listening to this, business people. So adjustments that would look okay are ones that are connected to insurance, like Delta Dental write-off.
Okay.
Or it clearly says 5% paid in full discount.
So I'm just being dumb here now too, but what's to keep somebody from not just putting Delta Dental discount on all of them?
They could.
Okay.
That's why I'm like, ugh, do I say this?
Okay.
They could.
So then it's probably just better, just all of them. If you've got, I don't know, like you said, 150, pick 10 or 20, just random ones.
Mm-hmm.
because they could be coding it as some other type of adjustment just to not let it catch your eye.
Yeah. Random.
Ugh, want to throw up.
Random is helpful, and then if something seems off, you're kind of honing. You're like, oh, okay, wait, this seems like, while the delta adjustments seem a lot higher than last month. Like, ooh, okay, I'm gonna actually go down that path and see where it leads me. Now, the other component is you can always spot check EOBs, which is, okay, so I'm going to spot check 10 or 15 accounts and just see what they look like. Is anything standing out as odd that I need to pursue? And then you can always look at your insurance adjustments, because your end of day reports or end of month reports are always going to list out the insurance adjustments and the patient's name. So you can pick 10 or 15 of those. And as long as the EOBs are easily accessible, which a lot of offices, they're not easily accessible, but find those EOBs and just go, does that adjustment match up with what the EOB said it needed to be? Okay. Check, 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 check.
Okay, so 2 questions on that, or a comment and a question. The comment is, I think that's not a bad idea, too, to look at the EOBs, just to kind of get an idea, because I think a lot of us, again, if you're a smaller office, you're probably used to looking at it, but if you're kind of a mid or bigger office, you're not looking anymore. We kind of forget just how crappy some of these reimbursements are,
Yes.
so it's kind of good to be aware of, because it is, like, back to your bleeding heart, like, that's the problem we have in our office right now. My associate, huge bleeding heart. The other one who helps us from time to time, like, crazy bleeding heart.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, too, it's like, oh, wait, I wrote off what? And I only got paid what? Like, okay.
Yeah.
I can't just keep doing this for free for every Tom, Dick, and Harry. Maybe I'm just going to pick Toms now going forward. You know what I mean? And so I think that's one thing. It is not a bad idea to look at EOBs for other reasons, just to kind of see. I think the question I had for you, did I forget my question already? You just said, EOBs may not be easily accessible. So what do you mean by that?
Some people don't scan them into a universal system, so either a shared file that everybody can access, or my preference is that they're directly in the patient's file, so that if parent calls about an EOB I don't understand, whoever the team member is that takes that phone call is easily able to either see a very detailed note on the ledger, or even easier, if they're skilled at reading EOBs, to be able to just click on that EOB and see what happened with that particular claim. A lot of offices don't do that. And so they're either in a file somewhere, or they are uploaded into an online file, but it's not a shared file, so that it's just the AR person's file and nobody else can access that. So, or it's a file and it's gigantic and not organized, and all June EOBs are there, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be scrolling through 500 pages of EOBs to find this one. So we've got to make sure that, first of all, it needs to be uploaded to a shared drive so that other team members can access it, and then it needs to be organized, or you need to load it directly into the person's doc center.
Okay, I feel like we have the first system where it's a shared file.
Yeah.
But then that kind of doesn't make sense, because then how would the AR person, because she has to take all these calls on explaining the EOBs, so maybe she does something with it? Like, maybe the front just uploads it, and then I don't know what she does with it after.
Yeah. It's failing me at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know what she does either, now that I'm thinking about it. So anyway, I do think it's a 2-for-1 benefit. You're double checking the adjustments, and sometimes even finding mistakes in those adjustments. That's happening a lot right now. If I'm randomly auditing somebody's EOBs, it's like, hey, this EOB made it look like you should have written this off, but look at the fine print. The fine print says blah, 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 blah. So no, EOBs are meant to be confusing. Insurance sends out very confusing EOBs because that is their intent. They want the office to accidentally write off more than they should have written off. And so even just being able to spot check those and ask questions about those, I think, is a good mechanism as well.
Well, that's just another yucky.
I know.
Where's the Pepto, Bethany? Like, insurance is trying to fool us.
You warned every listener to take their Pepto, but we forgot to take ours.
Yeah. God bless. I didn't even think about that. Like, we're supposed to write off more. Why? Just so that insurance looks better?
Yeah. Yeah.
Love it.
Then
Love
they
it.
don't have unhappy patients calling them, and they're getting away with something.
It's really kind of not their problem, I guess.
It's not their. They don't care.
Okay.
It's the onus is on the burden is on the doctor or the doctor's team to be smart enough with those EOBs to find it, to look for those. And there's some companies surprisingly that are better at it. Delta, as much as I hate them, they're pretty darn good at the EOBs, and I don't think their intent is to trick. But there are some companies that is just like, I just looked at one the other day. The patient elected for aesthetic crowns, pedo practice, they elected for aesthetic crowns. And so you follow the line across, $521 for each of these aesthetic crowns. And then you look across and it's like not covered, 0, 0, 0s all the way across. Even in the patient portion column, there's a big fat 0. So then when you look down at the bottom, patient portion is like, whatever, $432. And you're like, how, if somebody's not pausing to look at that and they're just like, oh, okay, patient portion is $421. This patient paid, $1,500. Oh, wow. We owe them $1,100. Okay, refund request. That's $1,100 that was lost to the practice because that EOB was written inaccurately. That 0 should not have been in the patient column. $521 should have been in the patient column.
Whew.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's a good extra layer that's not necessarily embezzlement related, but it's still just those checks and balances. The other thing that we haven't fully talked about is you do need to have a good petty cash ledger. So any money in goes on that ledger. A lot of people will keep that petty cash ledger within the actual ledger. It's not a pencil, it's a pen, and that particular ledger, so things cannot be erased. There's never the rules are you never white out anything on that ledger. If a mistake was made in pen,
you're talking about a paper ledger, not like the ledger in Dentrix. You're talking about our own. Here's our petty cash bag, and in there is a piece of paper. Okay.
Yeah. Or you can have a separate binder that tracks the petty cash transactions. But the rule of thumb is any money that goes in, that goes on the ledger. Any money that comes out, that goes on the ledger as well. And then that does need to be balanced. I normally say, depending upon how much cash the office receives on a weekly basis, somebody's responsible for balancing that petty cash. And ideally, that rotates. It's not the same person every time. Same idea. You don't want all that petty cash for one person to be responsible for it. So that would be the other component that we need to make sure. So
yucky. Do you have that number for that DSO now?
Let them handle the embezzlement. Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.